رحم الله من قرأ سورة المبارك الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الشيطان الغوي الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين، والصلاة والسلام على خيرة خلق الله أجمعين، وهو أفضل الناس وأفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين، وهو أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد. الله. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الميامين المهديين المقتولين المعصومين، ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين يكفرون بآيات الله يقتلون النبيين بغير حق ويقتلون الذين يأمرون بالقسط من الناس فبشرهم بعذاب أليم. Last night we broached the discussion of the conditions pertaining to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and what some of these conditions are. And we finished with that subject. But there was a question that I wanted to answer from last night that came in on the WhatsApp. So I will answer it right now before we begin our discussion, which is: هل يترك العمل إذا لم يتيقن الخلوص فيه أو يسعى فيه الخلوص مع الاستمرار بالعمل. That if somebody does not have certainty, 100% certainty that they have full khulus or in sincerity in what they're doing, do they stop that action or do they continue and try their best to have khulus? The answer is they try their best to have khulus. Don't abandon an action that is good, because then shaitan wins, really. Satan is the only winner who wins if you leave an action saying, oh, I have maybe one small doubt if I am completely, sincere. No. Continue in that act. Continue in that act. But just be aware why you're doing it. You're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just make sure that when you're making decisions, that it's for the cause of the khidmat of the deen and for Allah azza wa jal. That's the main thing. Not for your or my maslaha. That's the main thing here. So that's the answer to last night's discussion. Now moving on to tonight's discussion, we're going to be changing gears. As I mentioned earlier on during the introduction, that one of the subjects that we will be covering is the biographies of the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. The reason why is that we will see through this introduction and through this discussion that when we analyze their life, we're able to deconstruct certain themes that run through their life, and we're able to seek where they went wrong. That we will also see that sometimes certain words are presented which is kalamul haq, like if the words itself is true, but its intention is untrue. And the same thing will happen during the qiyam of Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. The Imam will come, may Allah hasten his reappearance, but then there will be people who will also be saying things against the Imam which will sound like the Imam. So how do you know who's right and who's wrong? So there's an ayah of the Quran today that I mentioned, Surah Al-Imran, that there are those who disbelieve. الَّذِينَ يَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. They disbelieve in the signs of Allah. And what is one of the first things that they do is that they kill the prophets of Allah without a reason. يَقْتُلُونَ الَّذِينَ يَعْمُرُونَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Right? They kill the prophets without a reason, and they kill those that are attempting to implement justice in this world. This of course applies to Amir al-Mu'mineen. This applies to all of the Aimma Tahirin. This applies to Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. That always those that are fighting for justice, those that are fighting for truth in this world will have enemies among the disbelievers. They will always find themselves in that situation. And Allah says, فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ, and give them the news of their severe punishment. The strange thing is that, what I'm going to kind of mention here, is that a lot of these individuals who partake in these crimes are not born that way. They're not born criminals. That's my point. They have an opportunity to either grow in their life or to shrink and contract. قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. So you either will contract or you will expand your soul. Your soul will either be filled with light or it will be filled with darkness. These are the options that the Quran presents us. Now, we will see that this becomes essentially the story of life. That different people make different choices. Those choices then affect the luminosity of their soul, the light that is in their soul. It affects the size of their soul in a spiritual sense. It affects whether they are growing or shrinking. We can either grow and progress towards Allah, or we can become small people and shrink. And ultimately, those who shrink, the worst of them are ashtaru bi ayatillah thamanan qalila, that they sell the signs of God, that they do business with God's signs. What is the greatest ayah of Allah except the Ahlul Bayt salamullahi alayhim? That they sell the signs of God. فَصَدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ إِنَّهُمْ سَاءَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And they block others from the path of Allah, and evil is what they do. So my point is that these are hard-hearted people. قُلُوبُهُمْ قَاسِيَةٌ. Their hearts are hard. And the nature of this world, my dear brothers and sisters, so often, brothers and sisters often come to me and they say, Shaykhna, this world is unfair. Why do bad things happen? Why is there, Yazid? Why is there Saddam? Why is there this person or this person? Or Hitler or whoever, all these people that have come and killed people? Or Fir'aun? The answer to this question is, number one, you and I will not find sa'ada in dunya. We will find happiness through our connection to Allah. We'll find happiness through our connection to the Nabi. But if we are looking for happiness in the umur dunyawiyya, in the affairs of this world, abadan, we will never find happiness. Our hearts are meant to be broken in this world. We at times in our life will be betrayed in this world. And God forbid, we are among those that betray others. But this is the nature of dunya. This is the nature of a world without the irtibat and the connection with Allah, with the divine, with a higher power, and the connection with the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that represent His commands on earth. We have to be aware of this. We cannot have this rosy-eyed picture of the world, that somehow the world is all about flowers and love. No, it is not. The world, because of the actions of human beings and the choices that they make, is a nasty place. It is at times a disturbing place. It is at times a dangerous place. We cannot run away from that reality. Now, what do the prophets come to? يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْقِسْطِ. They come, the prophets and the Aimma come to encourage justice, to encourage ma'aruf, to put the love in people's hearts for that which is khair. But what does Allah say about those in the past? يَقْتُلُونَ النَّبِيِّينَ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. Yet these people were killed without any reason, justification. So if betrayal could be done to them, then simple mu'mineen and mu'minat cannot be betrayed? Of course, it's possible. Today, we have a lot of information to get through, and I know it is late, but I want to complete this discussion tonight, if we can. I want us to look at the biography of a certain individual. His name was Umar ibn Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. He is Umar, the son of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. We, of course, do la'an on him in Ziyarat Ashura. But who was he? How did he become the butcher and the killer and the mujrim that he was? We have to understand the beginning and the end of this story and then reflect upon it. And I would certainly say Umar ibn Sa'd shared many attributes with the criminals who came before him. Awalan, how did he start his journey? He grew up as a famous military commander under the guidance of his father, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was a prominent companion of the Prophet. He became a Muslim at the age of 18, even before the Salat had become wajib. Umar grew up under the guidance of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was his father. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was one of the most prominent ashab of Rasulullah. Right? He fought major battles against the Iranians and the Sasanians at that time. He also founded, according to some traditions, the first military campaign to find the city of Kufa. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is a very important person in Islamic history. And his son is Umar ibn Sa'd. Okay, it's very important to understand this history. Now, Muawiyah chose a certain number of people that he felt could do the job that he needed to get done. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was one of the most brilliant and cunning and trickerous and satanic politicians that ever lived in Islamic history. He chose a certain number of people that he saw certain attributes within them. One of them was Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. وَثَانِيًا هُوَ Umar ibn Sa'd. Okay? Umar ibn Sa'd was chosen by Muawiyah because of his military experience, you have to remember. A lot of these guys, and we will talk about Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, inshallah, maybe tomorrow, they got their start in the military. They initially got their training with weapons, their training in war, their training as a fighter, their training in strategy when they would go out to fight long battles. Umar ibn Sa'd had this experience under his father's guidance. However, what Muawiyah saw in Umar ibn Sa'd is that this man could become a mercenary, meaning he's someone who could get whatever needs to get done for his own maslaha and his own desires. Now, we can only understand Umar ibn Sa'd unless we look at the life of his father, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who is among the most important companions of the other madhahib. In fact, the books of the other Muslims include him to be the 10 who are promised paradise. Who was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas? First of all, we know he is a fence sitter. He never sided with the Ahlul Bayt. And we also know, after the death of the Prophet, he did not side with Amir al-Mu'mineen. He sided with Abu Bakr. Further on, after the death of Umar, Umar created a shura in order to appoint the next Khalifa. In that shura was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen was supposed to become the Khalifa. Who does Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas side with? The answer, he sides with Uthman. After the war then, after Uthman comes, we'll talk about Uthman later, another night. After Uthman becomes the Khalifa, he is then murdered. There is a war known as the War of the Camel, the Battle of Jamal, where Aisha sets off in war against Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Against Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas refuses to take sides, however he does condemn Amir al-Mu'mineen. Pay attention here. The father, although he's supposed to be a neutral person who's going to Jannah, is the one who was instrumental in the Khilafat of Uthman. Now think about this. All of the events and the killing and the appointment of Muawiyah and the appointment of Yazid and the killing of Imam al-Hussein happened after the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan. Yet Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is among those of Ahlul Jannah. And in fact, the books of the other Muslims narrate that the person who describes the greatest fada'il of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is Imam Ali. I have no idea how this works. Apparently it's Amir al-Mu'mineen, according to them in their books, who says we never heard the Prophet praise anyone like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. I don't know. Really, we don't know how these things come together. There's obviously someone has cooked the books here. Okay? There's some funny accounting going on here. I think they're going to need a KPMG or someone to come in and do a full forensic accounting of the books. Because on one hand, Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, according to them, that the Prophet has not praised anyone like he has praised Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. MashaAllah. And on the other hand, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is condemning Amir al-Mu'mineen and siding with Uthman. All of these events led to the butchering of Imam al-Hussein, yes or no? If Uthman never became Khalifa, would have Muawiyah been appointed? No. If Muawiyah was not appointed, would have Yazid become Khalifa? No. If Yazid was not Khalifa, would have Imam al-Hussein been killed? No. If Imam Hussein was not killed, would Sayyidah Zainab have her face covering removed? No. The decision of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas at the Shura to appoint Uthman instead of Ali, salamullahi alayhi, has huge ramifications. And I don't see how people of other Islamic sects can run away from this. Yet he is supposedly among Ahlul Jannah. Not only among Ahlul Jannah, those that are guaranteed Jannah. Among the Ashra, the 10. My dear brothers and sisters, use your own intellect, your logic here. Ala kulli hal, the son did not fall far from the father and the apple does not fall far from the tree. The reason I'm saying this is that who was the most instrumental person in the life of Umar ibn Sa'd? His father. History tells us that he would not have had what he had if it was not for his father's grooming. And the interesting thing is that the construction of other schools of thought, such as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is built upon, to a certain extent, the decisions of people like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, where they basically say, look, Aisha kanat ala khata, Amir al-Mu'mineen kana ala khata. We don't know haq. They fought. We hope for the best. Narju min Allah. Bil irja. We hope that Allah forgives the wife of the Prophet and Allah forgives Ali ibn Abi Talib, because both of them maybe have committed some wrong action and grave action. It was people like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas who we call the fence sitters. He also, of course, turned against Imam al-Hassan, against Muawiyah. We know that. But the interesting thing is that I would not say he's a fence sitter. I would say he's a cop-out. Because when the time came, somehow he conveniently is always against A'immah. It's kind of like those people that claim they stand up for human rights in the occupied territories, but in every conflict they're siding with the aggressor. Okay. It's just claims, slogans. Right? They say, we're with the Madhlumeen in Gaza or here or Kada or wherever. But when it comes time to signing the treaty, oh no, we must protect the right of defense of the state. هذا سعد بن أبي وقاص. Okay? دائما كان على مصلحتي. Okay, he was on his maslahat from the beginning. They just say, he took the position of tawaqquf. He doesn't want to side with anyone. So the son learned from the father how to play the dirty politics. Dirty siyasa. You want to know dirty politics and dirty siyasa? Go to the beginning of Islam. You don't need Zionism and all this stuff or this contemporary issues of today in the Khalij and all these other places in Iraq. No. Go back there. You learn what the dirty politics and nifaq is. Ala kulli hal. Now we see Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. This is now interesting. For how many of you know this? I don't know this history. He was with Muslim at his death. According to Dhahabi in his Tariq and the early sources of Islam, and I have looked at them extensively, alhamdulillah, al-Masadr Tariqiyya al-Asliya. I have not read from the secondary books. I've gone to the Masadr themselves. Tabari, Baladuri, Dhahabi, Mas'udi, and people like this. We read that one of the people that was with Muslim at his death was Sa'd. Muslim turns to Sa'd in his final moments and he tells, Ya Sa'd, there's no one from Quraysh left except ana wa ant wa baynana rahim. There was a connection because Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, his father was an uncle to the Prophet. Yeah, things get complicated here. There's an internal family connection between these two, okay? Between Abi Waqqas and the family of Rasulullah. He was related to the Prophet through Amina bint Wahab, through the Prophet's mother. So Muslim turns to Sa'd. He tells Sa'd, this is the last moments of my life. I have two hajas to you. Awalan, deliver the message to Hussein that kadhabuhu, khadda'uhu, that Hussein has been betrayed. You are, at the end of the day, my cousin. We have relation and I'm trusting you. Thaniyan, I have a dain and a debt I need you to fulfill. These were the last two wishes of Muslim ibn Aqil, according to the famous books of some of the history of Islam. You know what happens, brothers? La ilaha illallah. This will make you cry. Muslim now communicates this to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, to Umar ibn Sa'd. Ubaydullah comes to Umar ibn Sa'd and he says, Ma qala laka. What did Muslim tell you? Now this was something, this was the confidence. He swore, we are rahim, we are friends, we are both from Quraysh, I'm trusting you. What does a riwayah say? Akhbarahu. Whatever Muslim had told Umar ibn Sa'd now spilled it to Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. Now Hussein was ambushed. This was it. La'natullahi ta'ala alayh. Nifaq. This is the top notch. Na'udhu billah, nifaq. Like I said, these guys were the dirtiest in the way they played games. Like I said, the politicians today are nothing compared to the politicians of those days and the military commanders of those days, the corrupt military commanders. Hussein was now ambushed. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad sends the army to Karbala. Who is now heading the army? Hur was already there. But who's now the second commander who arrives? Umar ibn Sa'd. لما نزل عمر ibn Sa'd بالحسين أيقن أنهم قتلوه. Very important. This is from the history of non-Shia. That when Umar ibn Sa'd arrived in Karbala, he was certain that they were going to kill Hussein. Decisions were already made, my dear brothers and sisters. Anyone who claims that the decisions were not made, they are lying. Or they are misleading people. And you're going to see something at the end that's going to shock you. But we're going to leave that this piece of paper to the end. Okay? Stay with me. So he was sure that they were going to go to war with Hussein. Salamullahi alayhi. Umar ibn Sa'd now gathers the troops in Karbala. He gathers the troops together and he tells them, Allah tarawna al-haq la ya'mal bi wal-batil la yatanaha an liyarghab al-mu'min fi liqa'illah. He says to them, O soldiers, do you not see that the haqq is not being implemented and done, and the batil is not being prevented? Do this so that you shall meet Allah. لِيَرْغَبْ الْمُؤْمِنْ فِي لِقَاءِ اللَّهِ. That this is for the case of the mu'min who wants to meet Allah. Pause for a second here, my dear brothers. Doesn't this sound like the kalam of Imam al-Hussein? Wait a second. Wait a second. Is this a khutbah of Imam Hussein in Karbala? No, this is a khutbah of Umar ibn Sa'd. La ilaha illallah. Umar ibn Sa'd is saying that we are here for al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahi an al-munkar. Allahu Akbar. Whose amr bil ma'ruf are you going to side with now? You see, shubuhat. When the mu'min is not strong ala aqidah salima, then they got problems now. Because now you don't know. Oh, Hussein ala batil wa ihna ala haq, na'udhu billah. This is what Umar ibn Sa'd is saying. These guys were master politicians. Master politicians, brothers. Dirty. He turns to them. Or rather, it's the soldiers turn to Umar ibn Sa'd. They say, Inna al-Hussein lama arhaquhu silah. Hussein is not here with weapons. What are you doing, Umar? He's got his women, his children, atfal, banat, nisa. Like, are you serious? We're locked up with like 20,000 troops. He's got like 70, 100 people. Like basically they're telling him, what are you here to butcher? Like this is overkill. This is like using a nuclear bomb on a house. It doesn't make sense. He ignored them. This is a sad story. Umar ibn Sa'd knew exactly what he was doing. And I'm going to pause here for 1 second. This is not the first time in Islamic history that we hear slogans. When Uthman was being avenged at Jamal, what was the slogan of Aisha and her followers? Ashab al-Jamal yasihuna ya tharat Uthman. Everyone's saying, on one side, ya li tharat, la li tharat. Tharat meaning, oh, for the revenge of Uthman. So people are like, oh, yeah, man, Uthman got killed. We got to go fight. Let's go. For the tharat of Uthman. You see how mu'mineen can get confused? Or people who are not on the strong path of having strong beliefs based on Quran and the Sunnah of Ahlul Bayt, they can go astray. Even the Abbasids, Banu Abbas. What was the shi'ar of Banu Abbas? Who knows? The Abbasid Empire that lived during the time of Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Kadhim and on, and they killed so many Aimma. Ya li tharat al-Hussein wa rida min Ali Muhammad. The shi'ar of Banu Abbas was, we're doing all of this in the name of Abu Abdullah. Wa rida min Ali Muhammad. And we're looking for the good one from Ali Muhammad to take over. Imam al-Sadiq salamullahi alayhi warned the Muslims. Hada ghadar. This is trickery. Wa khiyana. They did not listen. And Banu Abbas used all this nice idda'at and slogans, and everyone jumped on the bandwagon and joined Banu Abbas. And then it turns out nobody killed more Shia than Banu Abbas. Nobody slaughtered and oppressed Ahlul Bayt and Banu Hashim akthar min Bani Abbas. Wow. But wait a second, their campaign slogan was for the revenge of Imam Hussein. My dear brothers and sisters, don't be fools and sheep led to the slaughter. Be careful when you're listening to political slogans, social slogans. My dear youth, Shabab, don't be soft-minded. The Banu Abbas of the past is also Banu Abbas today. There's Umar ibn Sa'd of the past is also Umar ibn Sa'd today. Don't be weak-minded sheep. Listen carefully. Ask yourself, what would Ali Muhammad want from me right now? We think when the Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman comes and he will have the slogan, the right one, La Ya li Tharat al-Hussein, that Sufyani will not have shi'ar? Of course. And slogans. But we have to be careful as to what side of history we fall on. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Now, the story unfortunately gets even more dirty. Umar ibn Sa'd meets with Imam al-Hussein. Abu Abdullah presents 3 options to Umar ibn Sa'd. Option 1, let me leave from here and I will go wherever I have come from. Option number 2 is I go to Sham and I meet Yazid. These are the ways to get out of Harb. Imam did not want to die. My dear Shabab, for people that ask, oh, Imam going to suicide. No suicide. Na'udhu billah. This is a complete ridiculous notion. The Imam was looking for every khuruj and exit out of Harb and war and qatl and war and killing. And option number 3 was Hussein goes to one of the frontiers and the borders of the Muslim empire. He gave 3 options to Umar ibn Sa'd. You know what the history says? This is disturbing. Umar ibn Sa'd, qabala Umar ibn Sa'd. Umar ibn Sa'd accepted these 3 conditions. He now writes a letter from the battlefield to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa and sends the letter by horse. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad now writes back to Umar ibn Sa'd and he tells him, La karama hatta yada'a yadahu fi yadi. That there will be no honor until Hussein's hand is on my hand, meaning my hand is over his hand. فقال له الحسين لا والله لا يكون ذلك أبدا. Imam now turns to Umar ibn Sa'd and says, that's not going to work. I've given you 3 options. You're telling me that the only option is I go to Ubaydullah bin Ziyad and basically bend the knee. Imam says no. Now things get even more dirty. Because meanwhile, while Umar ibn Sa'd was trying to hammer out a deal with Abu Abdullah, he was hammering out a second deal with Ubaydullah bin Ziyad at the same time. He wrote a letter to Ubaydullah bin Ziyad from the battlefield saying, Ayyuhal Amir. This is, by the way, all in the Masadr Tarikhiyya Asliya, the early sources of Islam. Ya ayyuhal amir, uktub li ahad ray, hatta af'alu ma tara fil hal. Write for me, meaning give me the governorship over southern Tehran, Ray. And then I'll do what you want me to do. شوف النفاق في نفس الوقت هو يجلس مع الحسين. Allah. Nifaq. In the same time he's sitting with Imam al-Hussein. وقبل يعني هذه ثلاثة اختيارات. And he's even accepting these 3 options from him. Meanwhile, he's double dealing and doubling down. This is the Banu Umayyah. This is why we do la'an on Umar ibn Sa'd wa Shimra and on and on. Not for no reason, my dear Shabab, my dear brothers. There's clear asbab, wadiha for this. Now, it gets even murkier and cloudier and more confusing, the whole situation. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad now writes to Umar ibn Sa'd again, maybe in the same letter or a second letter. These are letters that are being exchanged very quickly by horse between Karbala and Kufa, from Kufa back to Karbala. In another letter, this is very important, my dear brothers and sisters, to understand what Ashura was about. He now writes to Umar ibn Sa'd and he tells him, look, shuf al-makr, huh? Look at the trickery. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad tells him, إن عاقبت كان ذلك لك وإن غفرت كنت أولى بما يفعل. If you punish Hussein, that's upon you, to you. If you forgive him, you're the first one responsible for whatever he does. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad had two intentions here. One, to tell him basically you better kill him. Two, he's saying if you do, I'm not responsible. Everybody's trying to get their skin clean here. Everybody's trying to come out of this clean. Everybody knows butchering the grandson of the Prophet is not going to go down well in the Muslim community. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad knew it. Umar ibn Sa'd knew it. Now both of them were criminals. Both of them were psychopaths. We're going to talk about the psychopathy of Umar ibn Sa'd in a moment. I mean, these guys were Ted Bundys. These guys were straight up killers, psychopathic killers, narcissists, sociopaths. They have all these attributes of psychopathy. But both of them were good politicians. One is playing the other now. And then Ubaidullah bin Ziyad tells Umar ibn Sa'd, لَقَدْ بَلَغَنِي أن حسينا وعمر يجلسان ناحية من العسكر يتناجيان يتحادثان عامة الليل. Basically, he says he sent a spy to spy on Umar ibn Sa'd. The munafiq is spying on the munafiq, okay? And he says, it's come to my attention that you and Hussein are having private conversations ex parte at the end of the battlefield. Why? Brothers, Umar ibn Sa'd grew up with Imam Hussein. Umar ibn Sa'd grew up with Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. Umar ibn Sa'd grew up with Abu Fadl al-Abbas, although he was older to him. Umar ibn Sa'd grew up with Imam al-Hasan, with Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah bin Zubayr. These guys all grew up in Medina. Don't forget this. Umar ibn Sa'd and Imam al-Hussein already had a pre-existing relationship. Meanwhile, Umar ibn Sa'd was pretending, yatahadithan, yatanajiyan, right? That they would be talking, okay, Hussein, we're going to find a way out. We're going to find a way. Don't worry, your Zainab won't be killed. Kulthum won't be killed. Sukaina won't be killed. I'm on your side, buddy. I'm on your side. Shuf al-nifaq. Look at this hypocrisy. It's sickening. If this should make you sick in your tummy. I literally was in tears about to throw up when I was reading this history. I could not bear it. I could not bear reading this. How the Imam was betrayed over and over. And we think today that the khiyana and ghadar and makkah doesn't exist. Of course it does. Who does those criminals in Muslim world learn from? From the biggest criminals. Yet Abu Abdullah Salamullahi alayhi, instead of cursing Umar ibn Sa'd, what does he do? This is the lesson, my dear brothers. He works for peace. He struggled as hard as he could until the very last breath for peace. Even after his companions were killed and the women were left, did he not try to do peace? Why? He said, Kunu ahraran fi dunyakum. Be free in this world. Imam al-Hussein was not on a suicide mission. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam took every opportunity and every advantage to try to protect his children. He did not want to see Ali Asghar slaughtered, Abdullah Radi slaughtered in his arms. Imam Na'udhu Billah, God no, he was not chasing after death. It was the political and social betrayal and dirty politics and dirty siyasa and nifaq and hypocrisy and devilish tricks that led to the butcher of Hussein and the slaughter of his Ansar and his Ashab and his children. If anyone ever asks you, you remember your Imam fought for peace to his last nafas and his last breath. And on the day of Ashura, Sayyidah Zainab comes out of her tent. It is narrated by Abu Mikhnaf in his Maqtal, and Tabari and others narrate this. قَدْ دَنَا عُمَرْ ibn Sa'd min Hussein alayhi salam. Umar ibn Sa'd now comes close to Hussein. إِذَا خَرَجَتْ زَيْنَبْ ابْنَةَ فَاطِمَةَ أُخْتَهُ. Zainab comes out of her tent. She says, Ya Umar ibn Sa'd, يُقْتَلُ Abu Abdullah wa anta tanzuru ilay. Will Abu Abdullah be murdered and you will watch? The Rawi says, صَرَفَ بِوَجْهِهِ عَنْهَا. He turned his face away from her. كَأَنِّي أَنظُرُ إِلَيْهِ. The Rawi, the reporter, is saying, as if I can see him. إِلَى دُمُوعِ عُمَرْ وَهِيَ تَسِيلُ عَلَى خَدَّيْهِ وَلَحْيَتَيْهِ. It is as if the tears of Umar ibn Sa'd were running down his face. The coward could not look at Zainab in her eyes on that day. Yet we read in the books of history of the other Muslims. What do they say about Umar ibn Sa'd in their books? They say, Umar ibn Sa'd, they, not us, and I'm reading. Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas Madani was a resident of Kufa. He was a very truthful man, but people began to not like him only because he was a commander of the army of Hussein. He was the second category of narrators. Imam Nasa'i, Ibn Majah and Bukhari have narrated the ahadith of Umar ibn Sa'd. So now he's a narrator of hadith. Mullah Ali Qari says it is possible that he repented. Now Dhahabi, in Mizan al-I'tidal, al-Juz al-Khamis, he died in 802, a very famous scholar of Rijal, of the biography of the narrators of hadith for the other Muslims, not for the Shia. And I'm reading directly, I'm not interpolating and I'm not adding any extra emphasis. Umar ibn Sa'd, this is entry 4190, okay? Umar ibn Sa'd, page 238, okay? Umar ibn Sa'd, ibn Abi Waqqas al-Zuhri, huwa fi nafsihi ghayru muttaham, lakinnahu bashara qital al-Hussein. That Umar ibn Sa'd is not to be blamed. He's not a bad man in himself. But he participated in the killing of Hussein, in the fighting against Hussein. My God. لكنه he's not to be blamed. وَفَعَلَ الْأَفَاعِيلِ. But he did some things. روى شعبة ابن أبي إسحاق عن عيزار ابن حارث عن عمر بن سعد فقام إليه رجل فقال أما تخاف الله. تروي عن عمر بن سعد فبكى. That he turned to Umar ibn Sa'd and said, do you not fear Allah? And Umar ibn Sa'd began to cry. Meaning, they're saying, look how pious he is. Look at his piety, his khushu. Yeah. Wow. Sense my sarcasm. قال العجلي روى عنه الناس تابع ثقة. Umar ibn Sa'd is the people have reported hadith from him. He's from the second generation. And he's a trustworthy hadith narrator. The one that Zainab pleaded when she was saying in Taqabat as-sama' al-ard, that if only the heavens would fall to the earth and they would not slaughter my brother Hussein. The one who is responsible and watching that slaughter is supposedly, according to other Muslims, tabi'i thiqa. This is Dhahabi Mizan al-I'tidal. Ala kulli hal, my dear brothers and sisters, my point is use your own brain. When you are in a conflict, look at the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt and look at what is closest to the Quran. Be with the Ahlul Bayt. What would they want from you in this situation? Don't just follow the crowd. Now Umar ibn Sa'd also had a bit of a fetish, they say. He enjoyed whips. The history tells us, the early history of Islam says, كَانَ لَهُ جُعْبَ فِيهَا السَّيَّاطِ. He had a box full of whips. Let's not get into what he was into, or who knows. He was a violent man, let's leave it at that. He had a slave. This is narrated in the books of history. This is not even from Shia sources. This is from the books of history, Tariq al-Islam. He had a slave. One day he didn't like the slave, so he decided to whip the slave's feet 100 times. The bottom of the palms of a little boy, a ghulam, they say. He whipped the boy so hard that he had blood dripping from his little feet, his young servant. The boy comes to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, his father, complains to him. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas makes a dua saying, "Oh Allah, kill my son Umar ibn Sa'd." That's probably the only truthful thing that maybe ever came out of the mouth of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Allahu A'lam. Maybe. Or maybe the only sincere thing. Who knows? The other Muslims believe obviously he's among the 10 of paradise. So everything he has said is sincere. And they claim Amir al-Mu'mineen certifies this for them. That's what I'm saying, brothers. Like, you got to ask yourself, how does that make sense? After Karbala, Umar ibn Sa'd was mocked wherever he went. He never got Ray, what was promised to him. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad never followed through on the deal. In every masjid he would go into, people would do la'ana on him and he would have to leave. When he was killed, Mukhtar brought Umar ibn Sa'd's head, because obviously Mukhtar sought his revenge, the revenge of Imam Hussein. Mukhtar kills Umar ibn Sa'd, brings the head to Hafas, the son of Umar ibn Sa'd. And he says, "Do you know who this is?" Hafas says, "Yes, it's my father." Umar then says, "For Imam al-Hussein, Hafas. For Ali Akbar," Umar ibn Sa'd was killed for Imam al-Hussein, and Hafas was killed because he was the killer of Ali Akbar. So both the father and the son, all three of them. So we got Sa'd ibn Waqqas, Umar ibn Sa'd, and Hafas. All these guys were, anyways, questionable people. Muslim ibn Aqil enters, as we just heard in the majlis. I don't want to continue too much on this, but we'll narrate in English. Muslim ibn Aqil enters Kufa on the 5th of Shawwal. He stayed first at the house of Mukhtar, as we know in the history. He read to them the message of Imam al-Hussein, and the people began to cry, yabkun. But the problem at this time was Bashir ibn Nu'man was not evil enough for the Umayyad. It's kind of like Walid ibn Utbah in Medina. Bashir ibn Nu'man would not actually do the orders of Yazid. Yazid realized that he needed to replace Bashir with someone else in the city of Kufa. So Bashir was removed from his position, and who replaced him? Ubaydullah bin Ziyad comes from Basra to Kufa. We should also understand that the people of Basra were already communicated to by Imam al-Hussein. Imam had already sent a letter to the people of Basra. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad had already intercepted some of these letters. So Ubaydullah bin Ziyad arrives in Kufa knowing what's going on. And when the people see him coming into Kufa, they thought it was Imam al-Hussein. Look at this trickery. And he at first doesn't say anything, because he wants to hear what are they going to say. And they start coming, "Oh, Hussein is here, Hussein is here. Abu Abdullah has arrived in Kufa." Meanwhile, it's Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, la'natullahi ta'ala alayh. Already the trickery has begun in Kufa. Whatever Muslim had achieved until now was now disappearing. As soon as Ubaydullah bin Ziyad arrives in Kufa, the whole situation is now changing. Muslims stayed inside the house of Hani until it was too late. Hani tried to protect his guests to the best of his possibility. Hani was taken to the palace of Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad turns to Hani, demanding to know where Muslim is. Hani refuses, of course, telling him that I will not betray Muslim ibn Aqil. I refuse to betray Muslim ibn Aqil. By this time, Muslim now moves to the home of Tu'a, the mother of Ash'ath bin Qais. She allows Muslim to seek refuge in her home, only to have her own son betray Muslim ibn Aqil. Now Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad knows where Muslim ibn Aqil is. He is ambushed. Muslim begins to fight like a lion against the army of Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. تَكَاثَرُوا عَلَيْهِ بَعْدَ أَنْ أَثْقَنَا بِالْجِرَاحِ. And the riwayah says that he was surrounded after he was fought over and over, and Muslim has wound after wound. فَتَعَانُهُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ خَلْفِهِ. And somebody stabs him from the back. فَخَرَّ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. And he falls onto the earth. But look at the courageousness of Muslim ibn Aqil. Another riwayah says that they began cutting his lips, that he had a cut in his upper lip. Muslim was tired. He rested his back against the wall. He was now crying. Umar bin Ubaydullah bin Abbas turns to him. لماذا تبكي يا مسلم؟ هو يقول أنا لا أبكي لنفسي لكنني أنا أبكي على الحسين بن علي. I'm not crying for myself. Rather, I'm crying for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He says, أرجو أن يرزقني الله الشهادة. That I wish only that Allah gives me shahada. This is when he's against Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. He's facing him in his court. He's saying, I wish that I attain shahada. Ala yaday asharrul bariyya. Against the most evil of creation. And then the riwayah says that he was doing the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was doing the istighfar, yastaghfiruhu wa yusalli ala nabihi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And he was sending salawat on the Prophet and his family. And then they killed him. But then the riwayah says they killed him and they threw him off of the top of the castle. Then they dragged him through the streets and they threw him into a garbage dump. In the case of Hani ibn Urwa, his fate would be similar. Hani was taken to the market. They took him to a place where they would buy sheep. Shall I now narrate what happens to Hani ibn Urwa? He tries to take his hand out of the shackles. He manages to get one out. فأنزعها من الكتاف ثم قال أما من عصا أو سكين أو حجارة أو عظم. Is there not a bone or a knife or something that I can use to protect myself? They said, no, give us your neck and now put it forward. A Turkish slave of Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, that is narrated by Mufid and others, takes the sword to cut the neck of Hani ibn Urwa. He misses the first time, and the second time he cuts the neck of Hani ibn Urwa. Brothers, it is also narrated to us that Muslim ibn Aqil had two young boys. They were left after Karbala. They were with their father after he was killed. Then they were handed to Shurey al-Qadi. When Shurey found out about the killing of Muslim ibn Aqil, he began to cry. The kids looked at Shurey and they saw that he is crying. And he told them that your father Muslim has been killed. They said, wa abata wa ghurabata. The children began to cry. Bakiya bukaa shadida. Eventually Shurey had to give the kids off to someone else. One of them was Mashkur, but Mashkur could not kill them. The most reliable riwayah of Tabari tells us that these boys run away from Kufa. Eventually they were discovered in middle of the night. The moment that they were discovered by this man, he promises them that he will not disclose their names. But brothers, what happens to the two sons of Muslim? This man was offered 10,000 dinar from Ubaydullah, 10,000 dinar for the heads of the children of Muslim. He then looks into their eyes. Saduq narrates in his Amali that as he looked into the eyes of the children of Muslim ibn Aqil, that the boys began to cry. He lifts his sword up and he cuts the heads of the children of Muslim ibn Aqil. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. مات مع حسين سلام الله عليه.